following interview is Mr. Leonard Deming. Mr. Deming has worked at Warner Gear since 1923, I believe he took. Is that right? And he has, well, he...
A little time out.
Yeah, fine. Mr. Deming has held a variety of jobs in the factory, and he, of course, has been a union member at one time. I knew him as Superintendent of Plants 1 and 2, and he held this position for a great many years. I think perhaps 25 or so, 19 years, Superintendent in those plants. And during this time, Mr. Deming has come in contact with union officials all the way from stewards to negotiating committeemen, I suspect the president of the union. He also can remember a great deal of the history of Warner Gear. He was there long before the union was organized. Now, Mr. Deming, as I told you informally before the tape, this interview will be reserved and it will be placed in the library of Ball State University. And it will be available to students of history, either of the labor movement or of Warner Gear, or of the Muncie community. And I want to thank you personally for granting your time and participating in this interview, and I'm quite sure that not only will it be beneficial to me, but future students of history of the Muncie community will be very grateful to you for taking the time out to give us your insight into the history of Warner Gear and the Muncie community and the labor movement in this area. Suppose we begin, Mr. Deming, by asking you when you went to work at Warner Gear and what Warner Gear was like the time you went to work there in the 1920s.
Well, it was a small concern at the time, possibly 300 to 400 employees, including the office. In 1923, things were very good. There was no problem in the way of work. Large truck transmission, small pleasure car transmission at the time, steering wheel, differential.
What kind of job did you have at that time?
I was a machine operator. I could go for it. Our first job was drilling, small drill press.
Now, did you feel that you had an opportunity to, did you think at the time, the 1920s, when you were a very young man operating a drill press, that you'd have an opportunity someday to be superintendent over all Plants 1 and Plant 2, or did this come about inadvertently or without any deliberate dreaming on your part or aspiring?
Well, at the time, in 1923, my dreams were certainly not of trying to do better in the way of work, but I had other kinds of dreams at that time. But in later years, my ambition was to do the best that I could do in the way of supervision.
Now, you feel that if a young man goes to work in a factory today, at Warner Gear or anywhere else, that if he applies himself conscientiously and diligently to his work, that doors will be open for advancement up the ladder?
Absolutely, providing the man helps himself. There's no limit to what he can do.
He'd be limited by his abilities only. He has the abilities and the willingness to apply his talents and skills by he's in the door to advancement and options and so forth.
Correct.
Now, there's a labor union over there, and I'm going to talk to you about that a little later. But what if this young man is active in the labor movement? Is this going to in any way hamper or inhibit his opportunities for advancement with the company?
Well, if the past history of the questions you're asking, if you checked into it, it was certainly found to be so that would have no effect on his future if he carries himself as a gentleman.
Yes. Now, you were a union member at one time, and I think, I don't know whether you want this on tape or not, but I think you told me that you had voted Democratic back at one time. And I know that you have since voted Republican, as I have myself on occasion, and many other people. But in the 1920s and 30s, of course, conditions were different. But let me ask you if you felt that the labor union coming into the shop in the 1930s was something that was going to be beneficial to you as a worker. Were you a worker when the labor union came in?
Yes.
Did you look forward to this? Did you feel that this was going to be a good thing so far as Leonard Deming was concerned?
Well, I did quite a bit of reading and newspapers and pamphlets, magazines, this progress. And I felt that certainly if unions and management work together, it would be beneficial to both in most ways.
You still feel that way?
Yes, I still feel it.
Yeah. Well, now, I know as a young man, I was negotiating minimum Plant 1, and probably should not have had that kind of responsibility. But one of the things that I remember was with greatest pleasure and greatest satisfaction is that during that year that I served as committeeman before I went back to college, that you and I and my colleague on the committee never had any serious difficulty resolving the grievances that arose with the factory operatives, with the men on the machine. That, well, we didn't always agree, and of course that's to be expected. But we always, I think, had mutual respect and trust in one another, and we worked as hard as we could to resolve our grievances where they arose, and in fact prevent them from going either to top management or to arbitration. And I don't think there's any question about it that we really didn't have at all. We really had no serious problem that we were not able to work out during that year. Has this generally been true? Your experiences working?
Yes, it's been, that's been true all through the years. We have had unions.
What benefit does the union have for the man on the machine? What are some of the things that you see that it might do to serve the interest of the man on the machine in a way that they would not be served if the union were not in the shop? Or are there?
Well, that's rather hard to answer. I don't know just how to answer that. I think that the union has been very effective to the machine. Some of the requests that have been made have been unreasonable, and in most cases have been worked out to their best advantage, and most of the time the worker is given the benefit of the doubt and trying to get along with you.
When did you first go on management supervision?
1937.
37. That's the year the union came in. You became a foreman that year? Assistant foreman, and then you became general foreman when?
In 1945.
And then superintendent in 48, 50.
I was night superintendent in 1947, and then general superintendent.
I see. If you had stayed in the shop as machine operator, do you think that you would have remained a union member? I know you were when you worked on it. I'm not asking you whether you would have always agreed with the policies of the union, but would you think that it would have been to your general advantage to continue staying in the union?
Not thinking about the advantage part, I no doubt would have, but I would have been of the mind of trying to do what was basically right, in my thinking, how things should be. I would have tried to get things moving that way, not in any manner being belligerent, but trying to work the problems out.
Leonard, I suspect if you'd stayed on the machine, you would probably been president of the UAW-CIO.
Well,
go ahead.
I doubt that, because my thinking even back before when I was a member of the union, I had several, not run-ins of any manner, but arguments with union officials about some various things that they were doing that I didn't think was right.
There have been some times over the years when the union and management have not been able to work out their differences across the conference table, and as a result, there have been shutdowns or strikes at Warner-Gear. Can you recall some of those?
Yes.
They had one in 1939, I believe. They had a couple.
Yes, I can't just remember the dates, but yes, they did have, and that is some of the one instance I was referring to a moment ago. But I didn't agree with, but I was very emphatic with the union pushing about it. And I don't agree with anybody or a group of people taking matters into their own hands and concern other people.
Do you think, Leonard, that the union has, in general, been beneficial to the management of Warner-Gear, to the corporation, or do you think otherwise? Or would you prefer to answer that in your own way, and you don't have to give a yes or no?
Well, I can't say it's been too beneficial. As far as Warner-Gear is concerned, I don't know that it has caused any greatly setbacks. I recall a couple of 3 instances where it did cost the company quite a bit of orders, and some orders canceled on account of working conditions.
What year was that? Do you remember? Was that during the war or just before?
I can't recall if it's years, 1953 maybe, 57.
Is this because the union was on strike, or because they had made demands that were beyond the ability of the company to pay?
Because of general walkouts and strike.
Do you have any idea, and I don't myself, but do you have any idea of whether Warner-Gear's work stoppages have been greater than the average for a corporation of their size in the automotive industry, or has the situation of Warner-Gear been relatively calm compared to other companies in the manufacturing automobile market?
At one time, several years ago, I would say that the walkouts of Warner-Gear, the average was a little higher than most industries. But in the past years, 7, 8 years, it has settled down to, I would say that the average is lower.
There are some writers of labor history who do believe that unions have been directly advantageous to the company, management, corporation, in that the union acts as a responsible restraining influence on what might be considered wildcat strikes, or blow-ups of a group of people working on the assembly line or here, there, and elsewhere, that the union doesn't permit this to happen anymore, and because the company now can call in one agency, the leaders of the labor union, and negotiate directly with them, then they really have a benefit here, because otherwise they might have to deal with a dozen different factions, with a dozen different wildcat strikes throughout their plants. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think maybe that is correct, but still, the membership do take matters into their own hands, not listening to their elected officers, and they do get into quite a hassle amongst themselves.
We still have wildcat strikes.
We still have some wildcat strikes.
Well, of course, I'm not going to ask you to guess as to whether or not these are really sanctioned quietly by the officers, whether they're really spontaneous, whether they might be instigated by a rival political faction. within the organization, but these various things have been speculated upon by labor historians. But in general, it may be that General Motors is better off in being able to deal directly with one agency representing all their employees would be if they had half a dozen different rival unions, or if they had no union at all and they had dissatisfied workers throughout the plant. Well, I had a great many questions in mind along this line. Let me approach it from a different angle and ask you if you think that the workers at Warner-Gear would have the great advantages and retirement benefits and paycheck, unemployment compensation, seniority rights, and many other things that they do have and that they're proud of and that I think Warner-Gear is proud of and the community is proud of. Would they have these to the extent they do have without pressure from their union over the years? What's your opinion on that?
My opinion on that would be this, that Warner-Gear, down through the years, even before the union, always tried to keep up with the trend in the industry, and also keep up with the trend in the local community, did their part, and there was instances where, without a doubt, maybe somebody thought and even was not treated as properly as they thought they should have been. But generally, I think that Warner-Gear, without a union, with or without, does everything they can to give their employees the best, along with the trend of the national.
Well, I think it's only fair to say that, I think there are three different views here, and I'd like to mention them briefly. Many economists feel, just as you've expressed it, except they probably would just say bluntly, that the economic conditions and advantages that the workers now enjoy would have come about regardless of the labor union. People in labor unions won't agree with that. They will take a great deal of credit. The gentleman I've talked to is almost a man. He's come up through the labor movement. Give the union tremendous credit for the advances they have made in wages, working conditions. And then there's a third point of view that I encountered one evening last week talking with Mr. Abbott Johnson, who used to be at Warner-Gear, who you may or may not know. Mr. Johnson is chairman of the board of directors of Warner Machine Products. Right. And his response was, well, we tried to do all we could for our workers, and we certainly would have had to have kept up with our competition. And there would have been some of these benefits that I think they probably came about a little sooner and in a little larger proportions because of the pressure we received from the union. Because, management is composed of human beings, and we all feel that we'd like to do these things for these employees, but we better wait a year, maybe 2 years, until we can afford it. We can't afford it yet. And that the union has applied the pressure and said you must afford it now, and therefore it has probably come about a little bit sooner than might have come about otherwise, and maybe in a little larger proportion. This is the point of view of Mr. Abbott Johnson. Explain the other easy. Well, let me ask you. I don't know how much you have, how closely you followed the labor union movement and its activities. But how about community services? Now, the workers tell me that, and there are many economists who would agree, that their increased purchasing power is a great asset to the community, including Warner-Gear, because it enables the consumer, the vast majority of the workers, to buy the product. And if their salaries were lower, they would not be able to buy the product. And they say that their salaries were lower before the union came in. And as a matter of fact, they received, I think, 3 raises in 1 year, the year the union was being organized. And the time it was organized, they were making almost twice as much as they were making a year or two before. Now, I don't know this is their point of view. Some of it is documented in the newspaper. The Muncie press back in the 30s. So they feel quite strongly that their purchasing power has been greatly enhanced as a result of labor union pressure. I don't know how to ask you to respond to that, or whether you care to respond to that.
Well, I don't mind. I think this, that as Mr. Johnson, before Mr. Johnson, I think his analysis of that is very good. I think he's right. I do think that because of the demands of the union, their wages maybe are a little higher than they would be, but right along with that, the economics takes it right away. So the level has been just practically the same, where they've gotten the wages where they haven't.
Now, this, of course, is a constant problem that I think labor unions are acutely aware of, and that is that oftentimes they get a raise and the following year they're back where they were the year before. As a matter of fact, I think this year, I think right now, that purchasing power of the average automobile worker may very well be less than it was a year ago, and it's highly likely to be an annual improvement factor and various other fringe raises. And this does constitute a problem. Of course, they're constantly aware of this and trying to correct it. But in spite of this, Leonard, if we look back at the standard of living of the average factory worker today and compare that with what it used to be, let's say, 30 years ago, I think we're forced to admit, in spite of all the inflation and all of the things that we think have happened to the country that have been undesirable and unfortunate, that standard of living of the average American worker is better today than it was 30, 35 years ago. Does that seem right to you?
Well, everybody has a different view. Not everybody, but a good many people have a different view of that. I don't think in our economic position that we have today that people are near so happy as they were a number of years ago. People are not near so carefree today as they were back when I was a young one running around having a good time. Our thoughts are different. Everything seems to be in such a turmoil. I have often wondered in my mind if maybe all this labor movement that we have had in the past, has it been good for our country? Basically. Well, economically it has been, but are we as free and happy as we used to be?
Yeah. I think that's a very legitimate question that you raise. I'm not sure that it's entirely attributable to the labor movement, although that may be one aspect of it. Part of it is just the fact that we have become an industrialized, bureaucratic society, and I don't know, I suppose it's probably a result of the Industrial Revolution, technological progress, and I don't know whether we could have avoided it. Sometimes we often wish we could. What we wish we could do, of course, we'd like probably to retain the values that prevailed when we were basically an agrarian society and lived in a small industry, where you had a dozen people operating the machines in the shop, and the men who owned the shop working with them and knowing them personally, and have this prevail in the vast industrial organizations that prevail today. And I suppose the greatest challenge of both the workers and the management is trying to keep this human relationship and this sense of values and personal work and dignity of labor and so forth intact that prevailed during a period of American history when we were predominantly a nation of farmers or small producers. And this has changed, and of course I've been with colleges and universities now for several years, and it's changed there also. And one of our greatest challenges, we feel, is to try to let each student feel that the college really does care about him as a human being. And we feel that if we can keep this, well, then he may not feel obligated to go out and become a dissident or join some sort of revolutionary nonconformist organization such as the Students for Democratic Society and take the dope and some of the things that the young people do. And I suspect this may be a challenge both to labor unions and to management in factories. Well, no, whether we credit the labor union with it or not, looks to me like the standard of living of the worker at Warner-Gear is a great deal superior to what it was 20 years ago. Now, I've been visiting some of these people, and many of them now, who have worked in machines. on the machines throughout the year. Today live in suburbs, and they have homes valued at $20,000 to $30,000. They have 2 cars, and they sent their sons and daughters to college. I don't believe this prevailed before World War II, did it? Again, I'm not crediting the union. This is, of course, conjectural. But I think that they have advantages now. They almost have become middle class. The working class has almost become middle class, it seems to me, in an industrial town such as Muncie. Maybe I'm looking at the exceptions. Maybe most of them still live around the railroad tracks, $6,000 house or something.
Well, I don't know. I don't think that would be the condition today. But if you will check up on these people who are living $20,000 to $30,000 homes and who are have send their children to college, you'll find that 2 or 3 people in the household do this are working, and even some of them working what is referred to as moonlight or 2 jobs. And I'm not sure that we can say that the worker today is better off greatly by unions. They may be making more money, but they're spending more to do the same thing. So I just can't give the unions the credit for the high wages. I will give the union credit for maybe some better working conditions.
Such as what?
Such as vending machines in their plants, vacations, and insurance programs.
Drinking water fountains with cold water and this sort of thing.
Well, some of the small benefits that have been pressured the companies, and which is a lot of the stuff is not necessary, but it's a little on the luxury side, so to speak, in a factory. But nevertheless, they do have it. Cafeterias, maybe they wouldn't have had, would not have had, were not appreciated. I certainly have nothing, I want it understood, I have nothing against unions. I think they are helpful to the worker so long as they stay within a reasonable request.
Yes. Another point we probably ought to mention, regardless of whether the standard of living is higher now for the average factory worker than it was 20 or 30 years ago, there's a very legitimate question that you raised both informally before we started recording the tape, and you sort of hinted at in some of your remarks a few minutes ago. There is a very pertinent question as to whether or not the young people who are benefiting from the sacrifices of their fathers, whether the young people are happier, are better off than their fathers were, even though their fathers went to work in a factory at 16 or 18 instead of going away to college at their father's expense. And of course, we're seeing some of this. And the thing that was really heartrending to me is to go out and talk with a gentleman who has worked 2 jobs for 30 years in order to send his son to college, so the son would not have to go out and take a job in the factory at 18. And sometimes it seems that the son doesn't appreciate this at all. And I'm not sure that the son is going to be a better citizen. I, of course, hope he is. And I'm glad that he has the opportunity to go to college. But the question as to whether or not we are improving our happiness and our moral values, of course, is a very legitimate question and a very pertinent question. I suppose one that we don't know the answer to yet. You know, of course, as I do, that every generation always wonders whether or not the new generation is going to be able to carry on the tradition successfully. I'm sure your father wondered about this, maybe not about you, but about other young people, and mine did, and I'm sure I shall. It's already beginning to, as a matter of fact. But in spite of this, why, as I survey American history, it seems to me that we have made fantastic strides. Now, I'm somewhat disappointed when I see people who don't seem to appreciate sacrifices that have been made and the advantages, the advances that have been gained by the men who chopped down the trees, cultivated the soil, and built towns, and built corporations, and I would say built the labor unions too, because I feel I would have to recognize as a student of history that they probably should not be given credit for all the gains that many an ardent union leaders feel that they're entitled to, because I think many of these gains would have come about. As a matter of fact, America has always been noted for high wages before the labor union movement came about, even during the colonial period, because of the shortage of labor and abundant opportunities here and the demands for goods. American workers were paid 2 or 3 times the price that European workers were paid in England and France and Germany. Part of this is attributable to favorable circumstances of the American environment. I think that I would agree with you that labor unions have certainly made a contribution. I might be inclined to believe that they made more or less than you may be. And this, of course, is a matter of opinion. When you start trying to document it, I think that most economists would say, and most sociologists would say today, that the standard of living of the average American is superior to what it used to be. But they'd hedge greatly when you ask them whether or not this would have come about anyway, regardless of the labor union movement, because we can't be sure. It's a matter of opinion and some documentation. And when you ask them whether or not people are happier or more moral, this, of course, they have to hedge on too, because we're not quite sure what we're creating, I think, and it may be that some of the attitudes resulting from the period of the Depression, the 1930s, and CIO, and some of the other more aggressive labor organizations are a result of the Depression. They grew out of that. Some of them may very well be partly responsible for some of the conditions that you may consider undesirable as well as desirable in our present day. Well, do you have any other comments on the labor movement at Morning-Gear that you'd like to add?
Well, only comment I would like to make, as I think you've explained it, but now I am retired.
That's right, I did not.
And I have a lot of admiration for a good many of union officials. We had very good relations down through the years. I am happy to have been a part of it. The union demands at times, as I said before, have been somewhat unreasonable, some of them greatly unreasonable, but in most cases things will finally work out.
Yeah, I can't recall a time when Plant 1 and 2 have been unable to reconcile their individual grievances to a place where they would just shut down the machines and walk out. Now, this no doubt happened before I went to work there. But during the time that I worked there, and I don't know about the time since either, but it seems to me that Plant 1 and Plant 2, now these were the older plants, and maybe the older employees worked there by and large, that we were able, most of the time, to resolve the grievances in the plant. Is that still basically?
That's still good.
All right. Before I close the tape, I would like to ask you a few things about Morning-Gear. Now, getting away from the labor union, the labor movement entirely, what can you tell me, Leonard, about the history of Morning-Gear? Do you remember, I know that you lived here, I think, all your life. Practically all your life. And what do you remember as a young man, or some of the things that you may have read about the history of Morning-Gear? Who started it? About when? For what purposes? What have been some of the major developments in the growth of the corporation?
Well, I can remember back a good many years. It was a small place, possibly a square and a half long and a half square wide, about Muncie squares. And I watched it grow from 350 possibly to as many as 6,100 employees.
How many are working there now?
At the present time, when I left the plant 3 months ago, there was full employment of 3,900 people.
How many retirees do you have?
I can't answer that truthfully, but I would make a guess of possibly 150.
And how old does a man have to be in order to retire?
Well, in the office roles, he's past 60. And the shop is past 60 as well, with supplement pay.
You happen to know what percentage of his wages he draws if he retires on, say, at 60?
Not offhand, I can't give you the percentage, but it's
substantial. If a guy, let's say a guy's working for 30 years on a machine and he's now 65 and retires, he'd be making probably now about $600 a month if he were still working in the shop. Now this is really a respectable salary for a machine operator. If this man retires, could he expect to draw, do you think, 200, 300, 400, or what?
The way the setup is now, quitting early can draw $400 a month. It has, there again, I'm a little vague on the years of seniority it takes to get that. But in most cases, when they're 25 years or greater, they will have an income of $400 a month, $2 over, $2 a month.
Leonard, now is this in addition to their Social Security? That includes it. Now, let me ask you, you know whether Warner has a little pamphlet or a brochure that gives a brief resume of the history and growth of the company? Have you ever seen one?
No, they don't have that on the web.
I'm not either. I think it'd be a good idea. Not only would it be helpful to me now, but I think it might help them, their employees would like to know this.
Yes, it has been talked about a number of times, but it's just not been given.
Now, Warner has certainly made a great contribution to the community through payrolls and contributing this purchasing power in the area. What have been some of the greatest periods of growth in Warner's history? Do you happen to remember that?
Along about 1924, 23, 24, 25, there was a rapid growth at that time. I would say, of course, that the plant that we have today was built during that period, from about 1918 to 1923 or 4.
The Warner salaries in the 20s considered comparatively high.
They were considered higher than most places in the community, but not as high maybe as they would be in the larger cities.
But in this community, compared to the glass companies,
much higher.
Much higher. Now, I understand that many of your workers at that time came from the glass bottle blowing background, and they were highly skilled workmen during the 20s. Was there any kind of workers' organization such as Company Employees Association or anything before you had UAW?
Yeah.
What prevailed, if you remember? What kind of place? What kind of union or what kind of employee organization prevailed?
It was similar to what we have now in Local 287. It was representatives elected by the employees to represent them in meetings with management.
Did you belong to that one?
Yes.
Did you ever hold an office in it?
No. There was a lot lots of benefits derived from that organization. It went by the wayside when Local 287 was organized.
Did the company accept the previous organization? I don't know about this, Leonard, but I keep hearing that that the AFL Craft Organization tried to organize one here in 1934 or 35 or somewhere along there. I have no record of it, but I keep hearing from various people that this happened. Do you happen to know about that?
There was a movement toward the skilled trades being in the AFL, but as I recall it, this was early in the labor movement, that it was voted out by the skilled trades themselves.
They just didn't accept it.
They didn't accept it.
And then probably 34 or 5 or somewhere along there was organized the Employees Association, or here Employees Association. And that was really the first union. And what you would consider that a union?
Yes.
Did the company recognize it?
Yeah.
Bargain with it?
Yeah. They did bargain with it too.
Now, you see this as, this may be a dirty question, but do you see this as a company union or as a part of Warner Gear to organize a company-controlled employees association to keep the union on, the CIO on?
Well, at that time, it was CIO, if it was thought about, was certainly not to my knowledge, was it even in existence or even thought about. It was, men felt like that they needed an organization to get with the company, to help work conditions. And I am not aware who did organize this. I do not recall the people's name, but it was strictly the Employees Association.
You may or may not be aware of this or remember this, but I've been very pleased to see that there was no hesitancy on the part of Warner Gear to recognize UAW-CIO once the election had been held. Once this union won the election, the management's point of view was, well, fellas, this is what you wanted, come on in, let's talk. And we'll talk with you. Whereas some companies, such as Forbes, said, hell no, and they just refused to bargain with these people, and this was contrary to the law, because the law required to bargain with any agency that people choose. And Warner Gear followed that, and they seemed to, I don't know, they might have had ulcers behind the scenes, but openly and candidly, they said, well, if this is what these people want, fine. Well, then we'll talk. And I don't even think there was a strike.
No, there was not.
And okay, very fine. Well, let me ask you if anything else comes to mind, Leonard, that you would like to put on the tape before we stop the recording.
Well, I think I have expressed myself both for and against some of the principles of the union movement. And certainly, I don't believe that there was a man at Warner Gear can say that Warner Gear as a company has mistreated them knowingly. They do everything they can to help their employees when they need help. Both with loans in the past, interest-free, pay back as they can when they needed it, to health, to sickness, and death.
Leonard, as superintendent, would you welcome having a union official call to your attention an apparent injustice being done to one of the employees down on the machine, either intentionally or unintentionally, by supervision or by the general conditions? Would you welcome being made aware of this so you could correct the situation?
Absolutely, and it has been done.
All right, thank you very much. If you have no further comments, then I see that Mrs. Deming's coming back from her golfing, and I think we probably better wind this tape up. And again, this is an interview with Leonard Deming, retired, former labor union member, Warner, former machine operator, and longtime supervisor, having served most immediately to this retirement, 19 years as plant superintendent of Plants 1 and Plant 2. I've known Mr. Deming for a good many years, and I know him to be a man of honor, integrity, and it's most gracious of him and most considerate to volunteer the time to talk on this tape, and I appreciate it. I'm quite sure that it would be helpful to future students of history of the community and the labor movement, and also of industry in this area. Again, thank you very much, Mr. Deming, for your time.
You're most welcome.